Hi everyone, it's Veronica, and in this video I wanted to show you how I created this drop-down menu effect. You can see when you click on the menu button it wipes down pretty smoothly, and when you click it again it'll wipe up pretty smoothly again. So I just wanted to show you how I did that. So I'm going to close out of my preview, and the first thing to note is that this is actually all happening in the master slide. So I'm going to go to my master, so view and slide master, and here in the main master slide I've got, as you can see, I've got a menu layer, and the same thing happens with the help button. So this help button at the top will do the same. It'll wipe down and wipe back up, but I'll just show you with the menu one in this case. So this is my original one that's all nice and working. I'm going to go to my duplicate that I made just to show you how I created this. So typically what you do is you've got your button and you would create a trigger to show the layer menu when the user clicks the menu, the button menu. So that's all good. And then on your menu layer, and I've removed all other triggers just to keep it nice and simple, what I've used is I've used a hotspot over the button, because the button is here on the main layer. So back to the menu layer, I've got a hotspot that I've labeled button menu. And typically what you do is create a trigger to say, if I'm showing the layer now, I want to hide the layer when the user clicks the button menu. And so that could work. However, let's just test it out. This is my tutorial one. So when we preview that, you can see that this slide, this wiping down effect works quite well, but when you click it again to close it, it'll just disappear instantly, and I don't want that. I want it to wipe back up the same way that it wiped down. So I'll show you how to do that. So I'll go back to my master. So here I am in my master slide, and I'm still on my menu layer here. So I'm going to delete this trigger that I created, and what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pause the timeline on this layer once the user gets to this layer, and once my menu has had time to wipe all the way down and everything has had the time to appear. So I'm just going to extend this here so you can see it. You can see I've got all of my items here, namely the arrows and the topics and the lines. So these are all the items that appear when the user clicks that menu button. So what I'm going to do is create a trigger that pauses, so pause timeline on this layer, on the menu layer, not when the timeline starts, but when the timeline reaches. Now I know the time that I need, and in my case it's 0.75 seconds. You'll have to play around with it a little bit depending on the speed of your animation and how you want things to look. For me it was 0.75. And then what I've got here is all of these items have their own entrance animation, but mainly you can see that the menu item here, which is the big orange background on the back, has a wipe animation of 0.5 seconds, and you can't see it because it's off my screen, but that's what it is. So I'm going to pause the timeline on this layer when the timeline reaches 75 seconds. The next thing I need to do is I want all of these items, so these are all my arrows and my topic lines. I want them not to go to the end, so I'm going to move them off the end of the timeline, and I'm going to put them here at 1.25 seconds. And again, I did a lot of testing to make sure that the timing was right and worked the way that I wanted. So now I know that it's at 1.25. And the other thing I need to do is I want them to disappear with a little fade. I don't want them to be an abrupt disappearing. So I'm just going to use a fade animation at a very, very quick one. I'll just do 0.1 of a second, I think. And then finally, the little line, I'll just make it a bit bigger so you can see. So this little line, I want it to wipe up again, and I want the menu background, this big orange square, I want it to wipe up again. So what I'm going to do in the timeline, again, I've got them all the way to the end of the timeline, but I don't want that. I'm going to move them back a bit, and I'm going to add a exit animation of wipe, and it's going to go up. That's right. And I want it to be, the line I want to be just a very, very quick 0.1, and the menu I want to be 0.5 of a second. And also the line can just come all the way there, and the menu just a little bit more there. Again, I know all of these times because I've already done it, but you can do whatever works for you. So now that I've got that happening, what we need to do next is, what will happen when we play it is the timeline will stop around here because we've got that pause trigger, right? And then what we want to happen is when the user, let me go back up here, when the user clicks the button menu again, we want these items to basically execute their exit animation. And to do that, the trigger that we need here is not hide layer, but resume timeline. So we've got resume timeline on this layer when the user clicks the button menu, which is this hotspot up there. And then there's one more trigger that we need, and that is we want the layer to hide eventually. So what we want to do is we want to hide the layer on this layer. We want to hide this layer when the timeline ends on the layer menu. So what will happen is when the user clicks the menu button, the menu layer will show and it'll pause itself at this point, and then the user can stay there as long as they want. And then when they click this one to hide the menu, what they're really doing is resuming the timeline so that all these exit animations take place. And then finally they're going to hide the layer when the timeline ends. And you can see down here that my timeline is really quite short. It's only 1.5 seconds for it to be able to do all of that, execute all the animations, and then hide itself. So let's just test and see how this is working. So I'm here in my preview of my tutorial duplicate one, and I'm just going to click on the menu. It's going to drop down, it's going to pause, and then when I click here again, it's going to unpause, execute all the exit animations, and then hide that timeline. And this is the help one, which you can see works in the same way. So I hope you find that useful. In my blog post, there's a free download for this whole template, so you can nab that as well. And I will see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.